Yo guys, what up? Welcome to my double core Marksman build. I kind of just improvised this build as I leveled. This is my my first actual playthrough of this game, and I essentially made a build from scratch that I thought would be fun, and it's doing pretty well. I'll give you guys a quick rundown on how it works, and I'll kind of tell you the progression of how I went with it. But yeah, I guess we'll just get into it. So for leveling up, the way my build went was I used Caltrops, Dash, Poison Trap, Shadow Imbuement, Forceful Arrow, Rapid Fire. So everything in my bar right now is the same as it was when I leveled up, except I'm using Penetrating Shot instead of Poison Trap, and I'm using Shadow Clone instead of Caltrops. I don't have Shadow Clone at low level, so I use Caltrops instead, and I switched over to Shadow Clone as soon as I got level to use Shadow Clone, which is all the way down at the bottom of your skill tree. It's like your ultimate ability, so it takes a while to get there. And then finally, I didn't use Penetrating Shot until I got something specific, and just to go through, just say what it is really quickly, it's two things. I did not use Penetrating Shot instead of Poison Trap until I got this ring right here. Mother's Embrace. I got this for killing Lilith in the campaign at level 45 or something like that. And I got a new one recently, which is why this is a better one. But this ring right here allows you to hit 5. If you hit core skill, it hits 5 or more enemies, you get a big chunk of resources refunded. And then that paired with this right here, this imprinted effect. Whenever Penetrating Shot damages an enemy, 2 additional arrows split off to either side. These side arrows deal damage, does not matter how much damage they do, of Penetrating Shot's damage, and do not split. The reason why that's important, why those 2 items pair together, is because whenever Penetrating Shot hits 1 enemy and splits into 2 more, let's say it hits 3 enemies, that's 3 of 5 enemies right there. Just for hitting 1 enemy that split off into 2 more. So if you hit 2 enemies and it splits off into 6, it doesn't always happen like that, but essentially this split adds to the target hit factor of there. So what'll happen is this thing says it restores a percentage of your resource, and it's 40%. But what happens is, if I shoot Penetrating Shot with these 2 mods into 15 mobs, it will take me from whatever energy bar I'm at. This thing only costs 35 energy to cast, and my current energy bar is 113. Let's say I'm at 40 energy, and I cast it, which would take me down to almost 0, and I shoot it into 15 mobs or 20 mobs. It'll instantly go back to full. It literally stacks on itself with that effect. It doesn't just do it once. It stacks over and over and over for every mob it hits. That's a unique new mob. So you can literally use it as a resource battery. It'll just fill you up repeatedly. So as soon as I got those items, that's when I finally switched to Penetrating Shot, and now that I have Penetrating Shot, that's the final build. And to break down what each one of them do, I'll thoroughly talk about what each one of them does and why they're all important. But Shadow Clone, straight up, is the only ability that is going to keep you alive when shit's going wrong. Because if you look at the bottom where it says the modifiers, it says you are unstoppable for 5 seconds after casting Shadow Clone. This build has no reliable form of unstoppable, and if you don't know what unstoppable is, it makes you immune to CC, it makes you immune to stuns, makes you immune to fears, makes you immune to freezes, makes you immune to roots. It makes you immune to anything that would otherwise make your character not playable. And if you guys didn't know, you can't actually do things like use a fucking Scroll of Escape if your character is currently stunned out or CC'd out in some way. If it's currently disabled, if your character's laying on the floor stunned, you can't actually use that item. And you could die if that ever is happening to you in hardcore. So this is your only form of I'm not going to die. It's basically this character's form of Bubble Hearth. You're oh fuck, hit Shadow Clone and Hearth out. Shit's going bad. So just know it is your ultimate defensive skill. But when you're not feeling like you need it to be used defensively, what it also is it's a massive form of damage if you're not afraid of whatever the mobs are that you're dealing with. And I guess it'll take some time to learn this. For instance, 2 mob types that I think are really scary for a rogue are mobs that will either chain stun you or they'll crack your armor and make you vulnerable. They'll like crack your health bar, and which makes you take way more damage. And one of those mobs is a barbarian. Those big guys that like raise their weapons together and they clap you with it and they stun you out. It can chain on itself. Like more of them can do it. More of them can do it. I've almost died like that before. Another one is the goatman, the big tall goatman, the guy that like jumps up and slams his two-handed weapon down. He knocks you down on the ground. And if other ones do it to you too, they can chain stun you out. Those things are really scary. Mobs with freeze affix are really scary. Like, I don't know if you guys ever fought a fucking quill boar with freeze, where it does like a burst quill shot where it shoots like 3 at once and it just insta freezes you every time. Stuff like that can be really scary for this character. Basically, forms of CC are really scary for this character when you're like at really high level, if the mobs aren't dying to you in half a second. So this is your only form of getting out of CC. It's a mandatory skill for this build to not. This ability has saved my life probably like 30 times. 50 times. I don't even, like, a lot. But again, also if you're not afraid of the mobs, it's amazing for damage. It does so much fucking damage. I insta kill bosses in dungeons with it in like literally 3 seconds. Dash is just really good for mobility. It's literally a mobility skill. This skill is not only good at giving you a good amount of like shaving off constantly shaving off seconds out of your dungeons and wherever you're going, because it's up so often. There's 2 charges of it, but it gets you out of bad situations all the time because you can just dash through mobs that are gonna like surround you, whatever, kill you. It's like having 3 charges of evade with having dash. It's really, really convenient. Also, another thing it does too, if you're not afraid, dash can be used in a way where you can dash through mobs and you can proc lucky hit chance, which will proc the ability to restore your energy bar. It's like another it's another energy battery if you do it through mobs, if it procs the lucky hit. But you don't have to use it for that much. Usually you'll be fine on energy. There's other ways to generate energy with this build, but it's just something else you could do if you wanted to. But realistically, it's just for mobility purposes. That's the main reason why I use it. Penetrating shot is your main AoE with this build. The more the better. This literally like scales. The more mobs that are in the area, the better it is, because it procs more. It has no diminishing damage the more targets it penetrates. It actually just increases, because the more targets it penetrates, it creates more like shards that go everywhere. So it's really nice. And also, if you look at the modifier, if it damages at least 3 enemies, your next penetrating shot has a 20% increased chance to be a critical strike. And then it deals 10% increased multiplier damage per enemy it pierces. It literally scales up in damage the more mobs it hits. So the more the better. If you get more mobs there, this thing it ramps up in damage repeatedly. It is an amazing skill for AoE, and it's very good for AoE. It's literally your AoE skill. And then finally over here, Shadow Imbuement is an imbuement that you'll use every single 13 seconds. You use it basically on cooldown. This ability, when you use it with for AoE with penetrating shot, that's when it's the best. It's still good for single target, but it is by far the best with AoE, because what Shadow Imbuement does is it makes it to where when a monster dies, so like, you know how I was talking about penetrating shot, how like it sends shards everywhere, like little tiny like 2 shards out of each shot go, like per mob it hits, it just goes all over the place. Well, each one of those little shards that gets shot out carries Shadow Imbuement inside of it, because you're imbuing penetrating shot to get shot out with that buff on it, and every form of damage it does to any target will apply the debuff to them. So every single mob gets affected by Shadow Imbuement, not just the direct line that you shoot through. And every time a mob dies with Shadow Imbuement on them, they explode for a shitload of damage, which detonates like the whole screen, and everything dies super fast. Like, it's literally like a chain reaction of explosions that just do an extra massive amount of damage, and currently mine's doing almost 3,700 damage. So it's quite nice. And then again, you can use it for single target, because it just adds damage over time for 6 seconds on the single target, which just is a little bit of extra damage. Again, it's not the greatest for single target, but this build does not really have a problem with single target at all. To be fair, its single target is actually insane. So I would feel like the AoE part of it is way better because it creates just a situation where your penetrating shot just absolutely murders the entire screen. And then over here we have forceful arrow. We just use this for the simple fact. This is like this skill has like 3 purposes, but it's really 1, 2, 3 core skill, 1, 2, 3 core skill, 1, 2, 3 core skill. If we're AoEing, you can just spam out penetrating shots because the damage you're going to get per penetrating shot is insane, especially if you're shooting into a lot of targets. But if you're doing single target, like shooting a boss or shooting like a mob with a lot of health, it's best to go 1, 2, 3 forceful arrow and then shoot a rapid fire out, because we're getting 3 benefits from this. And the first benefit we're getting is we're making the target vulnerable. So every third cast makes the enemy vulnerable for 2 seconds. The second thing we're getting from it is somewhere on my gear. I think I might have actually taken it off because I wear a different I wear this dagger now, but I think I don't have it anymore. But I'll tell you why. What I was using for the longest time, and I've actually replaced it with this. We'll talk about my gear in a second. There was a dagger I was using that had a modifier on it, a legendary modifier on it that said each time you cast a basic skill, your next core skill is increased in damage by X% up to 30, and it was like 9%. So every time I would cast a forceful arrow, it was going 9% more damage, 18% more damage, 27% more damage, and then I'd rapid fire. 9, 18, 27, and then I'd rapid fire. So we're getting the vulnerable effect on the third cast. We're getting the max ramped up. If you have that legendary affix, you're getting the ramped up effect of that. And then also we're using combo points. Combo points are really, really, really massive. You can tell you're using combo points if you go to your specializations tab. Just hit the hotkey for it, or literally open up your inventory and click it, whatever the hell you want to do. But you have different choices here, and we use combo points with this build. And basically, it literally, all it is basic skills generate, core skills spin them. That's all it is. So we're generating 3 combo points, and then we're spinning with either rapid fire or penetrating shot. But most of the time, we're not actually wasting time to generate combo points with penetrating shot. The only time we really do that is when it's like we're setting up a juicy cleave, but we're not ready. We're not in the right spot to do it yet. So we're like shooting and moving to like build some combo points. And once we get to the right spot, we throw a max combo point and penetrating shot out. But you really don't need to spend combo points on penetrating shot to get a really juicy one. You could just like spam it out. It does so much fucking damage. If you're gonna AoE into a lot of mobs, just fucking AoE. You don't need to waste time generating combo points that much. But for single target, you definitely do. So if you look at the rapid fire here, this thing says it does 5,835 to 7,132 baseline. That's what the base damage of it is. Now the reason why it's so important to build combo points with rapid fire is not only because it gives you more damage for each combo point you do, but it's multiplied by how many arrows you throw out there. So keep in mind when you read this, read the top part. It says rapidly fire 5 arrows. The keyword here is each. Don't forget that. Each dealing that amount of damage. So it's not total damage right there. That's what each arrow does. So that's 5. Like we'll just say that's 5 arrows doing like 6,500 damage, which is 6,300 damage or some shit. Or sorry, not 30,600 damage or some shit like that. Blah blah blah. You can do the math on it. I don't give a shit, but you get the point. It's 5 arrows is multiplied by that damage. And if you look at the combo point, we get an extra arrow per combo point. And then at 3 points, we have a legendary effect as well that's modifying this. But at 3 points, we have 9 arrows. So that damage gets multiplied 9 times. That is massive. That is very important to get 3-point out. You do so much fucking damage with 3-point rapid fire. So we're doing, let's just say we're doing 9,000 damage times 9. So we're doing 81,000 damage per rapid fire. It is fucking nuts. And then also, again, we're doing it with the core skill modifier that goes like extra damage, and we're doing it with vulnerability modifier. So we're doing it into a vulnerable target. So it's getting 20% more damage just because it's vulnerable. And if we have any vulnerability plus damage, more right there too. So it does absurd amounts of damage when we rapid fire into a 1-2-3 rapid fire. 1-2-3 rapid fire. It lines it all up super well. And then on top of that, if you're fighting a boss and you're not afraid of having to need the unstoppable effect of Shadow Clone, if you pop a Shadow Clone and then you go 1-2-3 rapid fire, the Shadow Clone does exactly what you do, and it mimics 80% of your damage. So if you're doing 81,000 damage, this Shadow Clone's doing like 65k or some shit like that as well on top of what your damage is. It's fucking crazy damage. And that's not even modified yet. That's like what the skill says it does, pre-modifier of like vulnerability. Because this doesn't include vulnerable damage. And it also doesn't include crit damage. And if you look at the modifiers on the bottom of this part, it says each subsequent arrow from rapid fire has a 5% additive increased critical strike chance up to 40% for the 8th arrow. So both the 8th and the 9th arrow have a 40% increased chance to crit. And then on top of that, we have a modifier on it that says gain 15 energy per cast of rapid fire when it damages a vulnerable enemy. So what this does is it actually generates energy faster than it spends it. It costs 25 energy to spend, and it generates 15 back if it damages a vulnerable target. And the amount of energy you generate and the amount of time it takes to cast this, which is like a 1.5 second cast, you actually gain energy. You'll literally go up in your energy bar. You can spam a vulnerable target with rapid fire and slowly grow your bar. So this build, both core skills in this build, if done properly, will actually generate faster than they spend. So you have infinite resource essentially. But if you don't spend them properly, you'll drain yourself and you'll be out. Like they will definitely deplete if you don't attack vulnerable targets with rapid fire, or if you don't attack enough targets with AoE to hit 5 targets or more. As again with the ring here, that's why that's so important. If you don't take care of that modifier, you'll actually run out of resource. But if done properly, you have infinite resource. So those are the abilities that I'm running. And now to give you guys a skill breakdown of my skill tree, we're running 1 point Forceful Arrow, 1 point in Enhanced Forceful Arrow. We don't care about anything else. All we want is the vulnerable debuff. I don't give it. The damage of this arrow sucks balls. It's just for the debuff. That's all we care about. Nothing else. And we're doing a pure range build. So anyone who's like, why don't you take the melee build vibe? We're not doing a hybrid build. We're doing a range build. This build actually can be a little squishy sometimes. So running into melee range repeatedly to apply vulnerable defeats the purpose of a lot of things in this build, like your range at distance, or your damage at a distance, and your survivability. And then over here, Enhanced Forceful Arrow, every third cast of Forceful Arrow has a 15% increased critical strike chance. Down here, we have some crit strike shit with precision that just makes it to where we gain damage per stack of crit. It's fine. It helps proc the precision stacks. It's totally fine. It's super easy peasy. Now going down to our core skills, we have maxed points in rapid fire. With we take the final rune where it makes it generate energy faster than it spends if we attack vulnerable targets. And then down here with penetrating shot, we maxed it out, and we take the rune effect that makes it do increased critical strike chance if it damages at least 3 enemies, which pairs up really well with our resource management and how we're doing that, where we're looking for 5 enemies or more. So it just makes it really easy to get crazy fucking damage with this thing when you're AoEing. So those are our 2 main skills here. Inside, and I would say with this build, the way you should kind of level it up is you should level up rapid fire, max it out as fast as you can. So like, let's say you're leveling up, okay? Just because I did kind of touch on the fact that I was using Caltrops and I was using Poison Trap. I'll just explain that really fast and then we'll move on. When you're leveling up, 2 points in the basic skills, move on. Max out rapid fire like I did here. But as soon as you unlock Caltrops, put 1 point in Caltrops, 1 point in dash, come back to rapid fire, finish it off, and then you can go down to Poison Trap, and you can max out Poison Trap, put 1 point in your Shadow Imbuement, and then max out your Poison Trap, and then any excess point you still have, you can put more points into Shadow Imbuement. Eventually, once you get Shadow Clone, drop Caltrops altogether, replace it with Shadow Clone, and then once you get Shadow Clone, then go back and start filling in your passives. And the passives like I have on my bars here. And I would recommend doing defensive, this passive right here, reactive defense. Do that passive by far first. And then do all the other passives after. Do all your damage passives after. Actually, no, that, to be fair, do this passive first, reactive defense, and then do this passive second. Sturdy. That's really, really, really important. Put 1 point in siphoning strike so you get some life on hit when targets are, you know, up in your fucking face. It helps a lot, actually. And then you can go for damage passives like energy generation over here. You have damage increase for passives over there. You know, blah blah blah. Resource generation. Do all the utility and damage passives after, like defensive passives first, and then damage passives and utility passives after. And then finally, when you get, like I said before, you're gonna have max points in poison trap. But as soon as you get the items to do penetrating shot, like I talked about, you'll come back in your skill tree and you'll drop poison trap altogether. Just delete it, and now take a penetrating shot. And now penetrating shot takes the place of your poison trap. That's all it is. And then that's the whole build of the skill tree. And then you can see what I'm running again. We'll run through it one more time. So 2 points in basic. We have maxed out rapid fire, maxed out penetrating shot with their final runes. With these passives right here, sturdy maxed out, siphoning strikes at 1 point. Over here, we have 1 point in dash. We have 1 point in weapon mastery, which I ran out of points, so I can't put any more, so I put it there just for a little extra damage. We have 1 point in rugged, and simply just to unlock reactive defense. Rugged's like not that great in my opinion. It's okay. It's fine. But this one is fucking amazing. Reactive defense will very much keep you alive in scary times. Max that shit out right away. Like once you do your first passives. Come down here, skip the skills once you don't have poison trap anymore. Don't even bother with the other ones. Just get the passives here of exploit and malice. These are really good damage passives, so you don't get these first. Get these last, basically. Get these like when you're like almost done with your points on your skill tree. Come down here. Your shadow imbuement should be maxed out, and go for mixed shadow imbuement at the end here. The reason why I go for this one is because it increases the AoE splash damage of the shadow explosion when everything is fucking exploding. So it makes your penetrating shot AoE rounds do crazy fucking damage. It just adds to that. And then come down here to your ultimate area. Get maxed out shadow clone with other mods. This makes it so your shadow clone does 20% more damage. That's just nice for damage. This one is very, very... Get this the second you fucking can get this. Because again, this is like your survivability right here. This is what you need to not die. If you're getting frozen, spam frozen. If you're getting chain stun locked. If your character is getting chain CC'd and it's going to die, if you just pop shadow clone while you're CC'd, it will make you immune to CC, and suddenly you can potion. Suddenly you can town portal. You can do other shit. You can get the fuck out of there. So get that shit early when you can. And then I run 3 out of 3 innervation, which just helps us get more energy back. 30% chance to gain an energy on attack when a lucky hit procs. And then second wind, every 100 energy you spend grants you a 15% increased lucky hit chance for 5 seconds. So it increases all forms of lucky hit, like this one and other stuff that might be on your gear, stuff like that. And then finally down here we have 3 points in adrenaline rush, which just gives us more energy regeneration, which is nice for recovery towards the next fight we're going to take after the previous one. Down here we have 3 out of 3 haste, which is again for utility. While you're at 50% max energy, you gain 15% increased movement speed, so we get around the dungeons faster and move around the map faster. When you're below energy, you gain attack speed, and attack speed is really nice at pumping out that fucking damage way faster. It makes when you're AoEing, it makes your penetrating shots go out faster, and when you're single targeting, it makes your forceful arrows go way faster, or your rapid fires go way faster. It's just nice for utility. And then finally, impetus, we have that maxed out at 3 out of 3. Our gear has really bumped that up. There's some items we wear that give it 6 extra points, but if you move 15 meters, your next attack does 63% additional damage, which is a multiplier, and that is a lot of fucking damage. But yeah, this is also a good skill to have, because especially if you're playing hardcore, you're never just standing still, planting your feet, and just never moving. You're constantly moving around, and you're gonna proc this skill all the fucking time. And when you proc it, when you're throwing AoE out with your rapid or your penetrating shots, it's a lot of extra damage in that big ass cluster of damage. And when you're moving around, dodging shit, and then you throw a rapid fire into a target, it's a lot of extra target with a rapid fire. It's really nice. And then finally for our course, or for our passive, our key passive, there's really no key passive here. That's great for ranged. This one is definitely the best. But like what I meant to say is other than this one's all right. Victimize is okay, but it doesn't really make a lot of sense with our build because we just don't really need it. Honestly, it's good for AOE. It's like decent for AOE, but like it's not even necessary. It just creates explosions when we attack into vulnerable targets. But this one right here, precision, critical strikes with marksman skills, which is all of our skills, by the way, that we're using damage, like our rapid fire, our forceful arrow, and our penetrating shot are all marksman skills. So all three of those proc this shit. Marksman skills grant me precision. You gain 4% multiplier. Increased critical strike damage per stack of precision up to a maximum of 20%, which is, it's just another multiplier on top of our damage when we're throwing damage out. And then it says when you reach maximum precision, so when we reach all of our stacks, all 5 stacks, because it goes up to a maximum of 20 at 4% per, so that's 5 stacks. Your next marksman skill is guaranteed critical strike that deals 40% increased critical strike damage. So again, this is something that makes a lot of damage happen when we're AoEing and we're just throwing out multiple penetrating shots, and one of them gets procs precision. It again chunks the shit out of everything. Just imagine when precision procs and like this impetus procs at the same time. That penetrating round does like absurd screen clearing levels of damage. It's and you also proc it with shadow imbuement. It just does insane damage. And then same thing with rapid fire. It just chunks the fucking elite, like the one elite mob you're shooting into. So that's our skill tree. That's what we wrote for our skills. For Paragon boards, the first Paragon board that I ended up using is the legendary node for No Witness, where it makes my ultimate do more damage. I didn't do it for the legendary node though. I did it for this node in particular right here, this rare one, which does 50% increased damage to healthy enemies, and then bonus another 25% damage to healthy enemies if requirements are met, and then you have 12.5%, and then you have crit strike damage, 12.5%, you have crit strike damage, 12.5%. You have a fuckload of damage to healthy enemies, and then you have a lot of crit strike damage. So this is just straight up a lot of front load damage when you're shooting into targets that are fresh, which increases your kill speed way faster, because a lot of times what this does is you just straight up kill mobs in one shot. It makes your leveling process and your kill potential just way faster. And there's other good nodes on this as well, like right here, 30% damage with a little bit of intelligence. Great. Over here we have some defensive one. We have some like 12% max life with some dex. That's nice. And then over here, another really, really, really good node for this build. Control impair reduction. So this is like reducing the time of when we're CC'd by freezes, when we're CC'd by stuns. Anything that's a CC is reduced because of this. So it really helps us get out of oh shit scary situations. And then it has, you know, more of it around it, like more control impair reduction around it. And then we decided on this board to go towards the left here. And we could have gone right, but the thing is I did not take this node here until I was around level like 85 to 90, like high level. I didn't really feel like I needed it until later on, but I took this one right away. And I went left first. I did this I came back and took this over to the right way fucking later, like way later. So I went left first. So my board progression went straight up. I took this node. I took this node. Like I took this, and I took all these nodes here. These nodes are all amazing because like all res and max life, damage and max life, armor, damage and dex, damage and dex. Like these are all great nodes. That node specifically is really fucking nice. That's 300 armor on a node. And just so you guys know, armor, which we'll talk about more in a second, is very, 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 very important. It's your best form of defense. So armor nodes are so good. So we get all these nodes on this page. And then another reason why we get all the nodes on this page is because we put our best glyph that scales with damage really well inside this node here, and we're gonna level it even more beyond what it is right now. But each node of Dex is going to be worth a lot of damage because of this glyph here that activates all of them like that. And the great thing about this glyph Dex, or this glyph that activates Dex, it also activates these yellow nodes that have Dex on them. So this 10 Dex, they're getting Marksman skill damage because of this glyph. Like, do you see how it says 200 armor, 10 Dex, 10 Marksman skill damage? If I take this glyph out, this will lose 10 Marksman skill damage. So if I take it out, it no longer has Marksman skill damage. But if I put it back in, it once again has Marksman skill damage. So Dex, this is our juicy, this starter node here is the highest juicy node of Dex we can go for. It has 70 Dex all around it. So this, every 5 Dex deals more % damage. It's going to be up to 70. So we're going to get affected by that by 14 times. So it's 14 times that whatever damage we get that to, which is fucking nuts. Which is a lot of fucking damage. So again, we're using the Ranger node there. And Ranger node is a really good one, a really good glyph to use. Mainly because it gives us damage reduction. 10% damage reduction because we're using a bow, which is fucking great. And then also, it just does good damage. And again, all of our abilities that we do damage with, Rapid Fire is a Marksman skill. Forceful Arrow is a Marksman skill, and Penetrating Shot is a Marksman skill. They all get affected by it. So, great fucking node. And it's high scaling damage, too. It scales well. So, super good node. Our second node we're using, the next tree we got up here, is Exploit. This is a very important... This node doesn't really scale well for damage in terms of, like, every 5 strength purchase within range, you deal 2% increased damage. It doesn't scale as good, but the additional bonus is unbelievably good for this build. What happens is, every time we attack an enemy with any ability, with Rapid Fire, with Penetrating Shot, whatever ability we use, this glyph makes the target proc vulnerability. So we are always shooting into vulnerability into targets by proccing this with this glyph because it just procs it all the time. And it can only do it once every 20 seconds, and it lasts for 3 seconds when it does proc. After it's over, we can still proc vulnerability on the target through Forceful Arrow, but this just allows all of our abilities to proc vulnerability for the first time. So like, for instance, when we're shooting into a big AoE pack, we just straight up Penetrating Shot into it, and everything's vulnerable, taking vulnerable damage plus the Penetrating Shot damage. It's very good. This glyph is a mandatory glyph to take with this build for damage. It is fucking nuts. Then we take this node over here, the life and Dex. We take this node over here, percent damage, 30% damage and intelligence. We take this node, this huge node for healthy damage, and then we go over here to the next board, and the next board we take is Exploit Weakness. This allows us, whenever we damage a vulnerable target, they take damage that ramps up to 15% multiplied. So the damage they take is 15 times more. 15%, like you just, yeah, it's a massive multiplier on the target after we vulnerable them. This isn't really used that much for AoE, but it's really, really good for single target because we will always be able to keep this up if it lasts for 6 seconds. We're repeatedly putting vulnerability on a target every 2 to 3 seconds with our Forceful Arrow on a single target because we're going 1, 2, 3 rapid fire, 1, 2, 3 rapid fire, 1, 2, 3 rapid fire. So we're keeping this up all the time. And then over here we have another node that is damage reduction from vulnerable enemies. So we just take less, and it's really, this is really nice too because it's like right on the way. We can get it right on the way, and we chose to go down instead of up because these nodes here, we don't want to stack too much of it. The damage reduction from vulnerable. The main reason why we got this is not only it's because this big one has 100 armor on it, but the side ones also have 50 armor on them. But also the damage reduction is kind of nice. 12% damage reduction from vulnerable is fine for the glyph or the rare node here itself. But the armor it has, which is 200 armor right there, is really fucking nice. Again, armor is very important. So we go down instead of up, and the reason why is because we want to go down with our tree. So we just save ourselves some points because we don't give a shit that much about those two on the side. So we can just ramp it up and go this way. So we go down and around, get these nodes right here. Come down here, get the legendary effect. And I would recommend whenever you get legendary effect, if you're not really within a glyph of radius here, you should always go the route, like always go the same distance no matter what you can, but always try to go for these stats that are not your main stat. So for instance, when I went here, I could have gone to the left, down, down. It would have been the same 1, 2, 3 points, or I could have went down, down, left, left, and it would have been 3 extra points. Always try to get stats that are not dex if you're this build, because you're a dex main. You're always going to have absurd amounts of dex, and the reason why you want to get other stats is because you want like shit like this where it says you need dex and intelligence to activate this bonus. It makes it easier to, if you choose a path that has less dex and more of other stat, to make sure you're always hitting your activations on these things, on the very nodes. But if it takes more points to do that, then don't do it. Only do it when it's the same amount of points, but you can get other stats than your main stat, because you'll have plenty of your main stat to activate everything anyways. So anyways, we get exploit weakness, and then we go down and around. We get this node right here. More % damage to vulnerable enemies and damage to injured enemies, which is really nice. Get more damage, more damage, more damage. We wrap our tree going to the left over here. We get another glyph node. This one is chip. This is another really, really, really good node. It's straight up physical damage, and targets take modified multiplier damage based on the damage, like physical damage increases the damage an enemy takes from you by multiplied damage up to 10% for 15 seconds. It's not activated right now because we're reworking our tree right now, but it will be active. I'm in the process of leveling a glyph node. I just changed out a glyph node, so I'm leveling it to 15. We're going to swap it out. But yeah, requirements not met. It's okay. I redid my tree. Don't worry about it. I'm not. The reason why is it was active, but I recently took this. Like, remember how I said I just did this recently? I was getting to the point where I thought I was going to fucking die if I didn't have this. So I dropped out a lot of points over here because I wasn't really struggling with my damage. I was instead struggling with maybe dying. So I went over here because the scariest thing for this build is when you get chain CC'd. That's why I talk so much about the unstoppable shadow clone shit, because it's so important to understand that for later on in this build. If you get to level 90 plus, it gets a little fucking scary. So anyways, we use chip, and we'll fix that as we level up with more Paragon points. It's totally fine. But then over here, it's another really good node. Vulnerable damage, physical damage, another 10% vulnerable damage. And then vulnerable damage, vulnerable damage, vulnerable damage. Lots of fucking damage over here. And then if we go further down the tree, we have we go down and to the right. And on this one, we took the page of Cunning Stratagem, and we take the node of Turf. And this glyph is also very, very good. This glyph is really nice for survivability. It's not the greatest for being maximum range and shooting enemies that are like downtown. It doesn't actually give you any damage in that regard, which is, it is what it is. But whenever enemies get on top of you, which will happen all the fucking time, enemies will constantly be jumping on you. This then suddenly activates, and it's really nice. And then also it's really good for things like when you have to run into mobs to kill them. Like, I don't know if you guys have ever dealt with it, but there are mobs that have something called suppression, and they have a big blue circle around them that blocks all ranged attacks, and you have to go inside the suppression field to do damage to that target. And at times like that is when this glyph is fucking amazing, because it not only gives you more damage to close targets, which is fine and all. It's not the best stat for you, but it's still good because it has a usefulness. But the main reason why we use this glyph is because it gives you 10% damage reduction against close enemies. So when shit gets on top of you, it just gives you more survivability. It's very noticeable having this. I would highly recommend using this. It's very nice. So it just gives us more close damage, and again, a survivability stat, which is really, really... Damage reduction is very fucking good. And then over here we also get, again, 200 armor plus another 100 armor for the bonus, so 300 armor in total with another 10 dex. And then we get more core skill damage and a bonus that does more core skill damage if requirements are met. We don't have enough intelligence to have that yet. We just need a gear that gives me that at this point, or more Paragon sets that has intelligence on it. But realistically, we're not going to just go fucking hunting for intelligence on my Paragon nodes. It's really going to come from gear or levels. literally. But it'll grow into it. It's still a good fucking node regardless, because it has 14% core skill damage is a very good node to have just in general. And then it also has dex that I'm actually going to swap this turf glyph back over here with this chip glyph. Because this is a dex-based glyph and this is a strength-based glyph. So nodes like this and this that both have 10 dex are going to get... That's also another reason to take them. It's going to make it to where chip gets better benefit. But right now, chip is not as important for the damage modifier as turf is with the damage reduction modifier. So I'm going to switch over turf back over here when I get some more levels and some more Paragon points to get some more strength over here to still keep turf active. But also, chip can then be active with all the fucking decks over here because we have a ton of fucking decks in this node. Like, as you can see, if I take turf out and if I take chip out and if I put chip over here, it'll be active. So as you can see, look at that fucking damage it does. So much fucking damage. I am going to keep it there, but the reason why I'm not doing that right now and why I'm having turf not over here right now is because I don't have it active then. And like I said, my damage right now is not the problem. It's my survivability. And I would, if I'm going to have something be inactive at the current moment when I'm lacking some Paragon points because I'm not level 100 yet, and I'm stretching myself thin for defenses here, I want turf to be active because it's 10% damage reduction versus close enemies. That's way more important to have right now. So turf should absolutely be the active one right here with 10% damage reduction. And we'll activate chip later again. Now finally, we wrap it down. We get this node right here. More core skill, more basic skill damage. Again, we're lacking some intelligence for the bonus, but again, we'll get that more as we level up and maybe get some gear. That's why I'm literally telling you, if you can ever take intelligence or something and it's the same amount of points you're going to spend, just take that path instead. Fucking do it, because you need side stats. But we do have enough strength here, luckily, so we have that part done at least. And then we come down here, go down and around. Armor and all res on this stat right here. And we wrap it down, and we go into the Cunning Stratagem, which is really nice because it... just to explain what this means, where it says your non-damage combo point bonuses are increased by 33% when you spend 3 combo points. What this means is it only affects our 3 point. It does not affect 2 point. It does not affect 1 point. It only affects 3 point. But the 3 point thing it affects on rapid fire is it increases the amount of arrows it fires. That's why it goes 6, 7, 9 instead of 6, 7, 8. And then over here on penetrating shot, it increases the lucky hit chance. So instead of 10, 20, 40, or sorry, 10, 20, 30, it's 10, 20, 40. So it just makes our bonuses on these abilities have a higher modified percentage or a higher modified number. It's really nice. We get more lucky hits on our penetrating shots, and we get another arrow on our rapid fire. And if you remember what I said, instead of having that damage multiplied by 8, it's now multiplied by 9. And also, that very bottom part, that 9th arrow has 40% increased crit strike chance. So it's fucking nuts. It's a lot of damage. It's very good. And then we wrap up, after we get the legendary node, we wrap it up here. We go left, and we get this final node here. Another 300 armor, and we get the armor nodes. So that's our Paragon board. What we're going to do now that we have all these nodes here, that are really nice. What we're going to do next with our Paragon board is we're going to come back over here. We're going to fix this section, probably take this strength over here, and we're going to swap back turf and chip like we just talked about. We're going to keep turf active over here, and we're going to swap chip back over here for way more fucking damage on physical damage. And then we'll be super happy because this is a way better dex node spot. And again, if you're making a different build, if you're doing a build in general, something to keep in mind in builds is whenever you want to place a glyph in your Paragon board, make sure you pay attention to the rare nodes around that glyph spot to make sure they're giving you the correct stat. So like, for instance, this glyph gives 10 dex, or sorry, this rare node gives 10 dex. This rare node gives 10 dex, which means it's a dex heavy glyph spot. This means you should absolutely put a node here that gets advantages from dex that will modify that really well. It will make your glyph node really fucking strong. But then if you look over here, this glyph node, or this rare node gives 10 dex. This rare node gives 10 dex. Oh, okay, it gives 10 dex as well, but that's a shitty fucking rare node. I don't want that. It sucks balls. I'm not taking it. Potion healing glyph nodes or rare nodes are fucking dog shit. The only reason why I have this one over here, the other one we took right there, is because it has so much armor, it's worth it. Armor is definitely like the best stat in the game for defense, so that's why we take that one. But otherwise, we would not have taken it. But over here, for instance, this one has 10 dex. This one has 10 intelligence. We're not going to put a glyph here that is one of our main damaging glyphs. Like we said before, this exploit glyph has really shitty scaling damage, but because like the 2% vulnerable damage, it does not scale very high. It does not like it scale at all, like the marksman damage one or like the physical damage one. But the reason why we use that glyph is not because of the vulnerable damage with the 2% where it scales poorly. It's because that glyph is fucking amazing with how it procs vulnerability with the additional bonus. So we'll put that with like a crappy glyph spot. Because these glyphs these rare nodes are really good, but it really sucks that they're not stacked on dex for a good glyph you want to stack dex with. So you got to think about that, because again, to give you an example one more time, like we talked about, this ranger one is a dex based glyph, and for every 5 dex we do 5% more damage with marksman skills, which is why on that node right there, it's 10 dex, so it's 10% marksman skill damage because it's 5% damage for 5 dex, so it's 10% damage for 10 dex. Okay, we just lost connection to the server. That's cool. But anyways, that's essentially my Paragon boards that I'm using right now. And again, like I said, the way I'm going to fill out the rest of it is I'm going to fill up the rest of my glyph spots to make sure they're all active. Again, to finally cap it all off here. The last thing I'm going to do now while I level to 100 is I'm going to fix this area right here, like I said. Get my strength I need here to swap these glyphs back to keep the additional bonuses that I need, like I talked about, like the damage reduction, but also maximize this damage on the chip node because it has a really good scaling damage with dex, and this is a really good juicy dex spot. But I'm going to go back and finish off all the dex that I can acquire. Like right here, for instance, I can take dex. There's a lot of dex over here that I can take. There's more armor there I can take. There's more armor there I can take. Really good stuff like that. And then also, if I still have points, a little bit of points left over, and I haven't run out yet, I'll maybe work my way to one final rare node. Like I might take this cold res node with max life. I might take this elite damage node with movement speed, like work my way up and around it. I'm definitely not taking that one. I might work my way up here and take this one that has a lucky hit chance to execute non-elites, which is okay. Honestly, out of all this one's kind of sucks. It's like basic skill damage. Basic skill damage kind of sucks. We don't really give a shit about that. Or I could even like basically work my way down the board and get a different board as well. I'm pretty sure you can go above 4 boards, but we're almost out of points. So realistically, we want to make sure we fill up our glyphs, the nodes around our glyph, to make them really effective. But that's essentially our Paragon board. Out of all these side nodes, I'd probably take that one, in all honesty. I'd probably work my way up here and get the cold res with the max life. That seems like a really good spot. And that's our Paragon board. That's our skill tree. Now, finally, the last bit that we're going to talk about is my items. And then that's it. That's for pretty much the rest of the build. So the way we're building our items is we're going for a balance of offensive and defensive effects. And there are certain things that have priority for sure. And for starters, I guess we'll talk about my defense. But our defense, the biggest thing out of all forms of defense that we want to talk about, that's really, 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 really important, is armor. The straight up armor on an item is very valuable. Armor equates to straight up fucking all damage reduction. It affects spells and it affects physical hits. It affects melee, it affects range. It affects everything. Armor is by far the best stat in this game when it comes to defense. Other stats are obviously nice to get around it, but armor it scales the best out of all stats. And as you can see, if we mouse over my armor right here on my page, look, if you look at the very middle in the yellow text, it says reduces damage, physical damage taken from enemies of equal level by 67%. So that's a fucking good, healthy, if you're in the 65, mid 60s, I would say that's a healthy number to have. You're probably not going to die. You're probably going to be A-okay. If that number is below that, if it's below like 65, probably want to pump those numbers up a little bit. If it's like below 50, you're probably going to die. Like, you probably want to get some fucking armor, because that's super scary. I don't really feel comfortable if this number is ever below 60%. Just throwing it out there. If it's ever below 60%, I am fucking shitting my pants. I'm like, okay, let's get this up, because I'm not playing this game properly right now. And now how? And if you're leveling from 1 to 50 and you're having this problem with bad armor, it is what it is. Make do with it. It's fine. But as soon as you can do Hell Tides is when this matters, because you can actually reroll stats on gear. And one of the most important stats you should reroll on your gear is exactly what, or I already have it on this piece of gear, but I re-rolled it on this piece of gear. But if you notice the gear, I have resistance, 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 total armor percentage. This helmet is incredibly important. And also the imprinted effect. That effect is so important as well. You gain 0.45% multiplied increased armor for 4 seconds when you deal any form of damage, stacking up to 45% multiplied. That's fucking huge at how much armor that gives us. Now, if you put this in well, one of my friends told me something that's really good. That's actually true. If you put this effect, this is probably your best defensive effect out of all things, because armor, again, is like the best defensive stat. Ideally, you want this effect to be on an amulet, because amulets get bonus effect from effects like that. It would go up to 75% instead of 50% max. So it could be really high. But anyways, if you notice, look at my armor right now. I have 7,337 armor, and this helmet says it's worth 946. If I take this off, just for get a calculator out, so we don't have to trust my math here. 7,337 minus 936, right? Or 946 minus 946. My armor should go down to 6,391, but it will go down more than that, because again, total armor percent is my total armor. It's not just the helmet. So if I take this off, it should have been 6,391, but instead it's 5,687. So we lost a fucking ton of armor by taking just one item off. And now, just losing this one armor piece, I had 67% resist of damage before. Without it, I have 45%. It gets real scary real fast. And all of a sudden, my character is going to get his ass beat by a lot more things. And it's not good. Like, that, you definitely want to make sure you have your armor up a lot. So resistances and armor are two of the really core value, really good defensive stats that you should be going for. Now, again, another piece of defensive gear is my chest piece here. Chest piece has a lot of armor on it. It has percent total armor. It has a nice plus maximum life roll on it. It has a perfect life roll on it, which is the main reason why I'm wearing it. It has poison damage, which unfortunately that is a dead stat for my chest piece here, but it's a really fucking good piece of gear otherwise, which is why I still wear it. But poison damage does nothing for me. It has lightning resistance on it, which is nice, just more res. It's another decent defensive stat. Resistance, or I would say resistances in the forms of like what's important, they're like probably third on what's most important. I would say number 1 most important is armor. Number 2 most important is either life or damage reduction. And number 3 most important is probably resistances. Like, resistances are still nice. They're better than nothing, but they're not as important as life and straight up damage reduction. And also total armor is like your best stat, I would say. It's another form. I would say, honestly, probably damage reduction is actually better than life as well. I think life is probably third. Resistances are fourth. Life is third. Damage reduction is second. Armor is first. Because it just gets good value. So, on this chest piece, we have, the defensive stats I just talked about, but then we have a defensive bonus as well, where it says basic skills grant 20% damage reduction for 5 seconds. So what I'm doing with this build is I'm making sure at least once every 5 seconds, I'm just throwing out one forceful arrow. I don't even have to hit a target with it. I can just throw it in the fucking wall, and it will reapply the buff of 20% damage reduction, which is really, 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 really nice at keeping my character alive. Going down to my gloves, or sorry, no, we'll talk about that later. That's an offensive piece. Going down to my legs. Our legs are decent armor value, 826. Straight up, massive defensive legs. 23.7% damage reduction from close enemies. 5.1% damage reduction altogether from all sources of damage. 10.5% total armor. And then again, 23% damage reduction from distant enemies. This chest piece is full damage reduction. This is like best in slot legs, I would say. If they were higher value rolls on some of them, like the part where it says 5.1% damage reduction, if that said like 10% instead of 5%, that would be fucking amazing, right? But it's still, the stats themselves are super good. That's like the best thing you could hope for, I would say. It's just all very good forms of damage reduction. We got damage reduction from ranged enemies, damage reduction from melee enemies, damage reduction, total damage, and then also total armor, which is more damage reduction. And again, if you notice, 800 armor off of 7,300 should take us down to about 6,500. If I take these legs off, it takes us down to 5,700, which is another... These legs are literally worth like 1,600 armor because of the 10.5% total armor as well. And if I'm not wearing the legs, if I am wearing them, it's 67%. If I take them off, it's suddenly 46%. Like, total armor is such a good stat to get on your items. And then that's... and then our boots, finally, we have legendary boots. Unique boots. These boots, they give us move speed. They give us crowd control duration, which is kind of whatever. They give us slow duration, which is... duration reduction, which is whatever. They give us a lot of cold res, which is decent. And then they give us a Trail of Frost that chills enemies, which also it makes enemies slow when they chase us a little bit. Just a little bit. As you can see, there's a... I don't know if you can see it on this terrain, but... There is a Trail of Frost that runs under my feet when I wear these, but this terrain is like kind of blocking it. But whatever, doesn't really matter. But yeah, these boots are kind of nice. I've found them. They're just good. Well, you absolutely can wear a defensive piece of boots. Like boots that are similar to the legs and to the chest and to the helm that I'm wearing right now. If you don't have these unique boots, wear something like that. Like the other pieces of gear I have. Life, total armor, shit like that. It's really, really, really good. And those are all of our more or less defensive armor pieces and stuff like that for actual body armor. And Aya, thank you for the raid. What's up? What's up, guys? Welcome. Now let's go over to our jewelry. Our necklace is resist all. All necklaces have resist all, basically. Or a lot of them do. I think they all do, honestly. It's a low item level, unfortunately. I need a new neck, but this is a really good neck. Because, again, resist all on the top part. Then you go down. Damage reduction from distant enemies. Straight up damage reduction. We get damage with ranged weapons, which is just nice. We have overall damage reduction again. So it has two forms of damage reduction. And then we get rank of impetus, which is... it's that skill that has like it's crazily bumped up in my passives here, where we do more damage when we moved a lot. So it's fine. My necklace is kind of like 50-50 hybrid, like half defense, half offense. It's whatever. If you find a really good defensive neck, that's totally fine. If you find a really good offensive neck, that's also totally fine. You can kind of try to balance your build out however you want. But defensively, damage reduction, armor, resist, really good stats. And then obviously we have straight up damage on this as well, which is also good. Our first ring is, Mother's Embrace ring. It's got preset stats because it's a unique item. It's got double res of Fire and Shadow, which is nice. It's got all stats, which is nice because it helps us proc our Paragon rare nodes on our Paragon boards. That would the other strength and intelligence we need for those things. It's got lucky hit chance, which helps us proc everything that requires lucky hit, which is just nice. It gives us all the things that have chances to proc, higher chance to proc. We have critical strike damage, which is nice. And we have overpower damage, which is also really nice. We'll go into those in a second. And then finally, the main reason why we wear this item over other items is because of what it says right there. If a core skill hits 5 or more enemies, we already explained this with how it works with Penetrating Shot. It is literally why Penetrating Shot is very good. This item, hands down, makes that shit work really well. But this is definitely an offensive item. It has resist on it because that's what jewelry has. but it's definitely an offensive item. And then finally, our other ring has kind of like hybrid stats again. It has resist all, or double resist on it with lightning and poison, which is totally fine. It has a massive life roll on it. We have over 1,000 life rolled on this ring. We have, once again, unfortunately, poison damage, which fucking sucks, but it is what it is. It's a dead stat. We have critical strike chance, which is really nice. Just, more chance to crit for now. And we have maximum energy, which is like kind of a whatever stat. It's not useless, but it literally, you don't need it. I'm not gonna lie. That's not really a good stat. It's kind of a shit stat. It's still doing something by increasing my energy bar here, but it's really not that useful. If you can get something else, there's other stats that are way better. And then finally, for offensive pieces, our gloves. We have a unique item called Grasp of Shadow. These are preset stats again. The only thing that changes is how much they roll. We got a mid roll for attack speed, kind of on the lower end even, but it's okay attack speed. We got a maximum roll vulnerable damage, which is super fucking good. We got really good a mid roll for shadow clone damage, which is nice. And we got a minimum roll for core skill damage, which means that's really important for that not to be like that. That is by far the most damage out of all of the stuff on this item that could be there. So if we ever find this item again, we're really hoping it rolls better than a 1 out of 3. Like if it's 3 out of 3, that's super good. That's crazy fucking value of damage, because that increases the damage not only of my rapid fire but also of my penetrating shot, because they're both core skills. But then for the lucky hit chance, if it procs, damaging a vulnerable enemy with a marksman skill or a cutthroat skill, which again, both these skills are marksman skills. Both penetrating shot and rapid fire are marksman skills. There's a 23% chance to summon a shadow clone that mimics my attack for 1 attack. It's really nice. It literally does my damage double when it procs. So when I proc a really good hit and it mimics that hit and does it again, my damage just chunks a target. Like I can almost one-shot a boss when that happens. When I get like a really good rolled damage and it doubles it with this glove, it does like the boss literally will lose like 70% of its health bar in one shot. And then so that's the gloves. They're really nice, honestly. And then for my weapons, on one of my weapons I have, this weapon has crit strike damage, damage to distant enemies, damage to vulnerable, a lot of plus dex, which is just straight up damage and dodge for a rogue, which is fine. It's 1%. It's 659 dex equates to 65.9 damage and 6.6 dodge. So essentially, you get 1/10 for damage and you get 1/100th for dodge. And then for my other weapon slot, Condemnation, a unique dagger. This one does damage to close enemies, which is it's okay. Again, it's okay. It's good for things like when we have to kill a suppressor mob and shit like that. It does basic skill attack damage, which is okay. It's not useless because it helps us proc vulnerability faster with Forceful Arrow. So it does something. We get critical strike chance against injured enemies, so it's like a good our crit chance gets bumped up a lot when we're like executing a target, and that also stacks with our rapid fire critical strike bonus, which is also really nice. Damage with dual wielding weapons. That is a dead stat because we're not using this for melee. We're using this for range. And for someone who doesn't know what wielding means, it means what weapon is in your character's hand when this applies. So if my character is running around with a bow in his hand because I just shot an arrow, it means I'm wielding a bow. And if I just stab something with a melee skill and I'm running around with 2 knives in my hands, it means I'm getting effect from wielding weapons, the dual wield weapons. I'm never holding daggers in my hands because I'm shooting arrows all the time. I'm never meleeing shit. So I'm not getting effect from that at all, which is fine. But then it has a lot of core skill damage, 28.5 core skill damage, which is fucking amazing. Mind Spirit, thank you very much for the 16 months. I appreciate you, dude. Sorry, I'm making a YouTube video, which is why I skipped it, but I fucking love you. Thanks, man. But core skill damage is really nice. And then finally, on the bottom here, it says your core skills deal 32% more damage, which is, again, ton of fucking core skill damage. Really nice. They deal 32% more damage when spending 3 combo points. So every time I do a 3-point finisher, it does a lot more damage, which is really good. Another reason why we want to maximize that 3-point thing I talked about earlier. If you remember, I was talking about reasons why we want to do 3-point. There's another one right there. And then it also says your basic skills using this weapon have a 30% chance to generate 3 combo points. Unfortunately, that does not apply to us with this build. So we could theoretically get a different weapon if it has better stats, because that applies to cutthroat skills like on the skill tree, Invigorating Strike or Blade Shift, something like that. Because it does not apply to holding it and shooting an arrow, because it says basic skills using this weapon. So it applies to actually stabbing something with that weapon. So we don't get effect from that, which is one of the main reasons why this weapon could be so good. But it's still a fucking juicy weapon regardless, because it's a fucking ton of core skill damage. So it's really nice regardless. And then finally, our last weapon, our final item, probably our best item we have, is our Wind Force Bow. This weapon is fucking cracked. It's very good. It has 60% damage to distant enemies, 63 to all stats, 51% core damage, 54% additional to distant enemies. So that's 114% damage to distant enemies between the two effects of that. And then plus 3 more ranks of the impetus effect, which is when we run for 15 yards, we get more damage. And then the big lucky hit winner of this item, which is really, really, really nice, not only for survivability, but also for damage. Hits with this weapon have a 19% chance to deal double damage and knockback. And now imagine if I lucky hit this bow and at the same time lucky hit these gloves, where I got some fucking massive juicy hit that doubled up and then it quadrupled up on these gloves. Like if these things proc together, it is really, really, really fat damage. It's really nice. So this bow is amazing. I really want to just find a higher item level of this bow and continue to use it, because the highest item level you can find in this game is 820 right now, and this is a 782, and a higher item level just means higher available stats. So this is a really good bow that's going to be really hard to replace. So anyways, really good effects on our items. This is the gear I wear. This Condemnation is not really mandatory for this build. These boots, these Penitent Greaves, are not really mandatory for this build, but I would say everything else that I wear kind of is. And if I wasn't wearing Condemnation and if I wasn't wearing the Penitent Greaves, instead what I probably would wear is I would probably wear either the legendary effect defensively, the legendary effect that does, for every mob around you, you get life regeneration, and then you get, like, it caps out at a certain number, but it's like hundreds of life per second if mobs are around you. I might wear that, or I might wear the effect that does, if your health ever gets damaged into a point where you're injured, which means you're below 35% health, you get unstoppable for 4 seconds or some shit like that. That's also a super good one. That is like, it helps you get out of stun locks, and it can't repeat itself for like once every like 20 seconds or some shit like that. That's like a really good pair. That's probably the effect I would use, honestly, for a defensive stat. And for an aggressive stat, instead of this right here for what this weapon does, what I would wear instead for an aggressive stat would probably be something along the lines of your core skill, your basic skills give you more damage per usage. That stacks up to 30%. It's like up to 10% per basic skill used, up to a total of 30% more damage on your next core skill. That's probably what I would use instead of this dagger if I had to put that on a legendary effect, because it's essentially the same thing what this does right now. It's basically the same fucking thing. Because it only works with 3 combo points anyways. So that's what I'd be using instead for weapons. And then again, for stats, for defensive stats, we kind of went over a stat tier list. For offensive stats, I would say it's best offensive stats I would go for if I were you is damage versus physical is really nice. Damage versus vulnerable is very fucking nice. Damage to distant is all right. That's like that's good, but it's not top tier. It's still really good though. Damage with ranged is really good if you can get that, because that applies to just all of your attacks. Damage with core is your best fucking stat you can get, honestly. That is such a good stat. Damage with marksman is a super amazing stat. Very, very, very good stat. Like I would say Marksman, Core, Ranged, Physical are all your best stat. Vulnerable is really good right behind it because it's a proc stat, but it's still really fucking good. And then behind that, I would say damage to distant and also crits are probably really good behind that. Like, to be fair, if you can get crit, take crit. Crit's really nice. It's just really rare. You don't get a lot of it. You can't really hard stack it to like 50% crit or some shit like that. It can't get, at least right now, I don't think you can. But crit is still really good too. Crit chance, crit damage, not versus injured. That's kind of like a random stat. I wouldn't worry about that. That's just because it's on one of my pieces of gear. But crit chance is really good. Crit damage is really good. Those stats are really nice. Overpowered damage, and you can't get chance, but overpowered damage is again a medium stat. That's not bad. It's never bad, but it's not something you should try to stack. You should definitely just try to stack something that's consistent. That's why I was saying like Core, Marksman, those are something you can definitely stack and they're really good. Ranged is something, Physical is something you can stack. They apply to everything. Really good. Distant is something that works again, but they're far away. Close is decent when they're close. These things are, they're medium stats that are good. So hopefully, and Vulnerable is still very good because you can force it to happen, and it applies to all of your initial hits with the exploit glyph we talked about, or the glyph we talked about. Still a very good stat for this build. So any of those stats, really good. But stats like damage with dual wielding weapons is fucking terrible. Damage against injured enemies is okay. I'm trying to like think of other stats that exist in this game. Damage with like imbued effects are okay. That's not your best stat. That's still okay though. Damage with like, you know, other stats that are dead stats for you are like damage with traps or like damage with fucking other abilities you're not even using. Like obviously fuck those stats. Damage with cutthroat abilities is a dead stat for you. Stuff like that, you want to try to not get those things. But if you find a weapon with a lot of the juicy stats we just talked about, like again, vulnerable, ranged, marksman, physical, distant, even close is fine, honestly. These weapons are fucking juicy. Crits, the crit damage, crit chance, those weapons are good. You can try to modify those to like have more of those stats by rerolling shit stats off. And that's kind of the gear you're looking for. And finally, the last thing I didn't talk about is gems. I run nothing but emeralds in my weapons. So I have 4 emeralds in my weapons, which is just more critical strike damage to vulnerable enemies. This is always, I'm basically always using this. Like most of the time when I'm AoEing, shit's dead before the vulnerability will run off. And then when I'm single targeting with rapid fire, I'm not usually casting rapid fire unless they're vulnerable. And the beautiful thing about exploit is I can shoot a target that's by itself that I haven't even touched yet. And if I just straight up shoot rapid fire at it right away, it'll make it vulnerable because any source of damage makes it vulnerable. So I can literally hold rapid fire down into fresh targets and it will just delete them all day because they become vulnerable the second the rapid fire touches them. And then after 3 seconds, it can't reproc that for another 20, but then I can still continuously reproc it if I need to with Forceful Arrow. So, yeah. Anyways, I use the green gems for damage in my weapons, and then finally for my armor, I use perfect topaz, or like the best topaz I have, because this is super, super, super good. It goes in hand with this passive I told you to get way earlier. This reactive defense, 18% damage reduction while inflicted with control impairing effects. Same thing here. 10% damage reduction while control impaired per gem. And we have 5 of them. So that's 50% damage reduction when we're CC'd. So we are a fucking tank when we're getting CC'd by stuns, freezes, whatever. And you're really going to need it because the one way this build is going to die is when you get stuck by a chain CC. Because like I said before, Shadow Clone is realistically your only out unless you have those the legendary effect I talked about where if you get injured, it procs and unstoppable as well. But this is the only unstoppable form we have to get out of CC. So if we're getting CC'd, we don't want to just die immediately. We can't defend ourselves when we're CC'd. So having a lot of damage reduction when we're CC'd will help a lot. And then lastly, we put perfect diamonds and the best diamond we can get in our jewelry, because diamond gives all resist to 5 stats worth of res, because it's there's 5 types of resistance in this game, and you're getting all res to each one of them. You got shadow, poison, lightning, cold, fire, and it's more value per gem than any individual gem that resists any individual element. So if you get like a fight, like for instance, it's, I can't remember the exact number, but I guess we can see it really fast, maybe. Like if we look at an emerald, for instance, it does 22% to poison, and they all do the same thing. Emerald is 22% to poison, amethyst is going to be 22% to shadow, ruby is going to be 22% to fire, blah, blah, blah. They're all 22.1, but this is 8% to all 5. So 8 times 5 is 40%. So you're comparing 22% to 1 res, or 40 amongst all 5. Again, it's only 8% per, but it's still worth 40% res. So it's way fucking more value. You're comparing the total of about 66% res to 120% res on just 3 pieces of gear. So definitely use diamonds. I would say if you really, really, really have to, if one of your reses is fucking awful, because that's just the way your gear is right now. If you have like 50, 50, 50, 50, 10, maybe hard stack that one so that all of them are like 44, 44, 44, 44, and you bump this one up to like 39, then that's fine. But if you can kind of like manage your gear in a way where, like for instance, I rerolled cold res onto this piece of gear. If you can manage your gear in a way where you have all your reses somewhat decent, then definitely use diamonds because it gives you the best value. And that's basically it for the gear. So that's the full build breakdown of my build, guys. Hopefully it helps you out. Hopefully this has been thorough for you to explain it. But I know it's a long video. This thing was probably like an hour. But thanks for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video, whatever I make. Much love. Peace out. Good luck if you try it. This is the ViBE dual core Marksman build. And yeah. And yeah, I'm going to post it on YouTube. So I'll have it on YouTube. It should be on YouTube now while you're watching this. But much love. Good luck, guys. And peace.